Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Teach, Sleep, Repeat. My name is Dylan.
And my name is Hayden.
And you really are getting your money's worth out of that jumper, aren't you?
What, this is a brand new jumper?
Yeah.
I worn it one time, Dylan.
Yesterday.
Yeah, but shut up, don't expose me.
Well, before we started, you said that I look like some kind of person that's just been brought off of the street. So,
Listen, you know the rules of how I buy clothes.
Right.
I go shopping once a year.
Yep.
All right.
Buy one item.
I buy one outfit and I wear it and I wear it and I wear it until you take the mick and then eventually I'll get something new.
Well, the only reason it's stuck in my head that you wore it yesterday is because we were at the BETT convention and obviously we did a lot of filming, a lot of content creation. Now that we are, I suppose,
huge
content creators.
Huge ones.
Weird thing to say, isn't it? But yeah, so let's just catch up about our week. I suppose it is going to be dominated by the fact we did go to a BETT. How many times are we going to say that word today?
You'd think that, wouldn't you? But I'm jumping in. I'm going to ruin your little schedule that you got on your head because I don't really care. Because last week you were like, "Oh, you didn't think of a rile up Dylan section, did you?
Okay.
You don't contribute anything to this podcast, Hayden." That's what you said to me off camera. Seriously.
I don't think it was even off camera. I think it was on the podcast. I want everyone to hear this.
So this week I'm going to just start with rile up Dylan the section. And I've got two. All right. They're quick ones. Okay. So these are things I've seen on the internet this week that just I thought that's going to anger Dylan, so I'll read it to him in the podcast.
So what a brilliant way to start off the episode.
I know, right? I'm going to get you in the zone. I'm going to get you. You'll be in the mood after this to really be passionate.
Cool.
All right, here we go. So first one. Someone said online, when teaching times tables, is it 1 times 4 or is it 4 times 1? Because I got a rollicking from another teacher this week saying that I was doing it wrong for the kids when I said 8 times 4 instead of 4 times 8.
Right. Okay. Ooh. There's two parts to this answer. Okay. The first part is it depends what times table you're doing in terms of there is actually a right way to have it. Okay. So technically there is. I think this is going to summarize the problem of teaching though.
Right.
The meta here. So stick with me. If you're doing the 4 times table, the 4 should come at the end of the number sentence. Yes, because let's say 2 times 4. Mm-hmm. That is saying you've got 4 2 times.
Okay.
3 times 4 is saying that you've got 4 3 times.
Right.
So when you're doing the 4 times table, the 4 should come second because the first number dictates how many of that number you've got. Okay. So if you're doing the 4 times table, it's 8 times 4. If you're doing the 8 times table, it's 4 times 8. That is actually officially the correct way of showing it and doing it. Because 4 times 8 is different to 8 times 4 in that there are groups of 8 in one and there are groups of 4 in another. Okay, so if you were to draw it out, it is true to say that if you're learning the 8 times table, the 8 should come second. If you're learning the 4 times table, the 4 should come second, etc.
Okay, I think this is mad.
However, well, what do you mean mad? Because it's just correct.
When learning them?
No, not listening to what I'm saying. I'm saying that is literally the definition of the way we write it and what it means. Okay, that is indisputable. All right. The point though I'm making here is who cares in terms of if you're teaching the children a times table fact. I'd argue it's good practice to be showing them both way around at the same time to show the commutativity of multiplication, to show that it doesn't matter which way around we have the numbers, the answer remains the same. Yeah. I think there's a teaching point in there. I think rollicking a teacher for it being the wrong way round is absolutely insane and is just setting the wrong precedent altogether. Because if you're going to go down the route of, well, actually, it's this because of X, Y, Z, and there are real reasons, like I just explained, that's an opportunity to help your staff and to give them that information and say, oh, by the way, this is actually how it's meant to be. Like, I'm pretty sure talking to you, you didn't have a clue which way it was meant to be.
No, I knew that thing you said at the start. Okay. That's why I find it interesting that you went down it, because when I think more about it, I think it's totally irrelevant in all situations ever. I don't think there is a situation where it's relevant to know that information, to the point where that information is one of those things where it's like, oh, that's a fun fact, but it has no practical use in the real world in any way.
I think it does have a practical use in terms of if you're grouping things by 8 that you're putting in a bag or something. It doesn't matter, sure. But I'm just saying if you were to draw out 4 times 8 and 8 times 4, you would actually and should draw different things. Okay?
The drawings. All right.
So what I mean is in a real life context, if you're multiplying, if you're doing 6 times 4, you should have groups of 4. Yeah. If you're doing 4 times 6, you should have groups of 6. So I'm just saying that is correct what this person's saying. But my wider point here is it doesn't actually matter in this context. Yeah. And when you're talking to your staff, if you want that to be a focus for whatever reason, I don't necessarily think that should be a focus when you're doing times tables, by the way. I'm not saying that children should be shown this and it's the be all and end all. I think you can learn your times tables really well without it. But if you want to be that person who says, well, actually, it's actually like this, like I just did then. You should do it in a supportive way that just says, oh, by the way, did you know? Because there's no reason at all why everyone should know that. For example, listening to this podcast, if someone's listening to me then going, what are you on about? I never knew that. It doesn't matter. You can still teach times tables really effectively.
I guess that's the point. I'm thinking of it really in the context of this. Because when you talked about drawing it, you absolutely you are right, because you would draw 8 lots of 4 differently to 4 lots of 8. I get it. But in the context of the kids are learning their times table facts. They're learning 8 times 4. Or learning 4 times 8. It's like, does it matter which way you said it to the kid? Like, the kid's now not going to learn that fact differently. They're just not. They're not going to learn that 32 is the answer differently or less efficiently because you said 4 times 8 or 8 times 4.
No, I agree with that. But if you look at any times table resource, if you're learning a times table, the second number will always be the times table you're learning, because that's just how it's written out, and that is literally what it means.
But then, like in TTRS, the next sheet is in the other way around, so clearly they're both valid.
Yeah, it makes it completely. And you should be teaching your children. I teach my children all the time. Like, let's say, for example, in year 4, we've been doing a lot of the 6s, 7s, 9s, and the children might be really secure in their 3s, 4s, 5s, etc. So if you get to a point where it's 7 times 5, and we're still learning our 7s. So it might be written down as 5 times 7 because technically it's a 7 times table question. I say to my kids all the time, you need to be clever about this. Do you know either of the times tables? Like, I know my 5s. Okay, cool. So if you don't quite know your 7s yet, and you're not confident in counting your 7s independently yet, you're not going to not answer that question. You're not going to be in a situation there where, well, no, Mr. Price said the 7 comes second, so I'm counting in sevens. That's just ridiculous. So you teach the children to have strategies to overcome it. And I would want my children to look at it and go, well, I'm going to count my 5s because I know that 5 times 7 is the same as 7 times 5.
That's where the language lots of comes in hand, isn't it? 5 lots of 7 or 7 lots of 5.
And that's what the multiplication sign means. It means lots of. So when you replace it with lots of, what I said makes perfect sense. 5 lots of 7 is clearly actually different to 7 lots of 5.
Turns out that was a submission by me, and Dylan was the one giving the rolling. So I didn't. Well, I didn't roll. I'm glad I got 2 because that didn't work.
That's not true. No, it didn't rile me. What riled me up was the attitude of some teachers who think they can shout at other adults.
Because they know some.
I've seen that so often in schools, and that are so toxic, where you forget that you're just another human. Like, why are you talking to that person like that? Like, I'm sure we've all been guilty of it.
And does it matter enough? Like you said, there are some things that just don't matter enough to even make a thing of it. And some things that do matter enough to you absolutely should make a thing of it. And sometimes they get confused, and it's like that was not one of those things.
No, if in that times table the person was teaching them the wrong answer to that times table, pick it up and say what's going on here.
Or like, for example, right, they were doing that 8 times table, that lesson. And they're like, that lesson was the 8 times table. And they said it the other way around, and then they started counting in 4s. Then maybe that person would be like, you're focusing on the 8s today. Sure. Like, you can link it back to your 4s, but maybe you did, I don't know, whatever. There might be something there. Here's the second one, okay? Because hopefully this one will get you a bit more annoyed and get some juice out of this answer. Someone said, got docked an afternoon's pay today for having the audacity to ask for some of my PPA time to go to my own child's school event. So they lost their afternoon of pay.
What? So was it PPA or not?
It was her PPA, and she said, "Can I use some of it to go to my child's? Wasn't even all of it. Can I use some of my PPA to go to my child's school event?"
I hate this so much. You get me riled now. I can't believe the culture we have in school. We are teachers in a school where we suddenly then, when I'm the parent and want to go to a school event. Some schools just don't seem to realise that that's obviously important. The same school, by the way, this person's school probably runs workshops for parents, and they're how can we get more parents to come to this workshop? What can we do to incentivise them? It'd be great if they can come, wouldn't it? Can I go to my kids' one in the one down the road? No. What? And secondly, it's in PPA. What's wrong with you? PPA should... I think PPA should be completely flexible anyway as a perk of the job, because there's so many negatives to this job that we talk about all the time. PPA should be completely fluid because we've got so much to do that doesn't even fit into PPA. So much of our job, only like half of it even fits into PPA, and people do loads of extra stuff at home anyway. So if I want to use that time for something like going to my child's school event, which I know is important because I'm a teacher who works in a different school, I think it's completely insane when SLT or people in the top just are so know about it.
How likely do you think it is, right, that member of staff who just got docked some pay didn't still get the entirety of their job done for that week or the next week or whatever they were going to do in their PPA yet now just didn't get paid as much for it.
Exactly. So how much of the time were they going to spend at home to do the work anyway? That's what you're saying. Yeah. So we live in such a mad dichotomy in this job where if you do anything that's seen as less within your job, that's just seen as, by toxic SLT anyway, that's seen as you doing less. Oh, your marking's not as good. Well, what's going on? Your marking needs to be better. Oh, you didn't spend all of your PPA in this one room where I need to know you are. How dare you? You clearly didn't spend your PPA in the way you should. Anything less within the confines of the school building is picked up upon and is awful and is dreadful. But nothing is ever nodded towards in these toxic schools as to the extra mile you go every single week.
Yeah.
So it can only be a negative. Like, if you do less of something, it's always bad. It's never taken into account the fact that I've done 10 times more outside of school. Yeah. I did 4 hours of planning on the Sunday, but because I took half an hour of my PPA to want to go and see my son's show at a different school, I've been docked pay. Where's my pay given? That should be 8 times more for the extra. More.
There's no way that member of staff then didn't do, like, ever, that work that they would have done in that time if they were at school. So basically, they just got some of that pay got docked. They did all the work anyway. They just rescheduled their day. What they were really asking was, hello, SLT, do you mind if I slightly reschedule my day today? I'm doing all this work in my undirected time anyway. And to be honest with you, I work at home all the time anyway, so I'll just tag on an extra hour to the work I do at home, just so I can go and watch my kid at the school play. No, because I can't monitor the work you're doing at home, can I? So how do I know you're doing an extra half an hour? I better take that pay away from you. Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. So
I think you rolled yourself up there.
Yeah, I did, yeah. I got into it as well.
That's insane. That's riled me up incredibly because it's so common.
Yeah.
I can't speak to people right now and say enough. Some people work in a school and they might comment on a reel we post or something on social media and they'll say, well, I don't see this happening. Well, I don't notice this. I don't see that. I don't think this is a problem. What do you want about?
Yep.
This is someone who's literally said this has happened to them, and it happens all the time. And I just think that there are some wrong-uns in charge of schools. There are because they have this business mentality of like cutthroat, business, got all the time, and it's just not this. We work in a school. Anytime ever I see a school reluctant to let a teacher go and do a school event with their own child, it's a huge red flag to me that school doesn't have the right ethos or atmosphere, and I wouldn't want to be anything to do with it.
Yeah. There's those relationships, isn't it, between work, the whole idea, like worker and boss. It's that relationship, isn't it? It is just different in schools, and if you don't think it is, then yeah, you're probably on the wrong side of this argument, to be honest with you. But speaking of businesses, because you were talking about, that idea of it being run like a business, like you said, we've been to BETT this week. Let's have a quick reflection. Let's just get because we're going to talk about things that were inspired by BETT in this episode, right? But let's just talk about BETT for a second.
Yeah.
What's your kind of, it's the first time we've been, what was your gut reaction or feeling coming away from a day at BETT in London?
Well, firstly, it's huge. I think the sheer scale of it was what hit me straight away. The amount of and the number of edtech companies that are out there doing their own thing,
so many,
is insane. And I think we'll talk about it later about how it's slightly overwhelming sometimes. But the day itself, I just wanted to start off by saying a huge thank you to Learning by Questions, because they basically took us under their wing. They invited us up to their stall. We set up there. We've been posting loads on social. So go and find us on Instagram at Teach Sleep Repeat Podcast, or on TikTok with the same handle. But yeah, Heather, who works for LBQ, basically said, come here guys, you've got a space, go off and do what you want. We went and looked at all different stands, but they really looked after us. So that was really nice.
They were really polite, really lovely. And listening later again, stay tuned to this episode, because we even spoke to the founder of LBQ, which we've got a little bit of a sound bite for you later on. Yeah. And that was awesome as well. I really enjoed talking to them. I love talking to the whole team. They were just so polite and lovely to us the whole time.
They were so nice. And do you know what? It's that northern spirit from a lot of them. I've got to say, I'm a northerner. I might not sound like a northerner at heart, but I was a northerner. Well, I'm a northerner. I moved down south when I was younger, and I just love the north. This just seems so friendly.
Yeah, they were. And I tell you what, you took advantage of it, because you drank half their hot chocolates, I think.
Well, they had a barista, so the whole thing was have a brew with LBQ, and the idea was get a cup of tea for free. We'll have a chat. We'll see what we can do, because they were demonstrating LBQ, etc. And I said, we got there. So I don't really drink tea or coffee. Like, I'm more of a hot chocolate person, just as a joke, as if clearly there's not one in this coffee machine. Oh, we can do hot chocolate. Sorry, what? You can do hot chocolate.
Can I have 3?
Can I just have a conveyor belt of them? Like when you see, and every time we go back to the stand, someone said, "Do you want a hot chocolate?" I was like, "Yes, I do. Actually, I think I have a hot chocolate." And when we were leaving.
I forgot about this. Go on.
So it was near the end of the day. We went back to get our stuff, and we were packing up. And then another lovely person working on the stand came up and said, "Can I get you anything? Can I get you a drink?" And I wasn't going to get one. And I said, do you know what? I might get my 54th hot chocolate of the day. Can I have a hot chocolate, please? She's like, yeah, no, I'll go and get it. Because I was just going to go get it myself, obviously. Yeah. I don't expect anyone to wait on me in these things. They're all busy. And I was like, thank you so much. We finished packing and we just walked off.
We just went back into packing mode. We were making sure we had all our equipment. We took loads of stuff.
So there's us walking off, tripod under our hand, and we got to the door, and I was like, I've got hot chocolate, man. It's not hot chocolate, it's just a chocolate. It's a cold chocolate.
I feel so bad for the idea that she's walked up like, yeah, just making old teach, sleep, repeat, another hot chocolate. He loves them, he does. He loves them, doesn't he? He comes back and we're just gone. We're just gone, not even there. Honestly, there was. Can I jump in with a highlight because it is at your expense and I loved it.
Go on.
So we had one of our good friends was there, Sophie Bartlett. She's been on this podcast a couple of times in the past, and we've become really quite good friends with her over that time as well. Since then, and she was there, and you might remember Dylan talking in a previous episode about the times table test we did and how he was a champion, how he went into a class and he was like, yeah, I'm the maths lead, done, and he put his pencil down, he beat all the kids and the teacher.
Sure that's quite how it went, but
it was, very arrogant. And and we were speaking to Sophie about it, and she said, I reckon I could beat you. And I thought, here we go, because I know how competitive Dylan is. And he was like, he laughed at her. Of course, no, you couldn't, because, arrogant again. I'm just painting this picture of you here. And she turned up. She was at BETT. Guess what she brought with her? A times table test, 100 tables. Dylan, I think you should take over the story at this point, actually, and tell us what happened.
One of the very rare occasions where I don't want to talk over you, actually, because I don't think we need to tell this story. We had a race, and she turned into some AI robot. We were at this event with loads of mechanics and cool stuff that you can get in your classroom to help you. And I just thought for a minute, she is one of the exhibits here. She's an AI robot who can just write extremely quickly. It looked like gliding over something like imagination. It just was something out of a book.
Couldn't possibly be just a person who is better. It had to be an AI robot. I think that's the crux of this.
It's the only explanation. Yeah. Anyone quicker than me is cheating. Anyone slower than me is just really bad at times tables.
Rubbish.
You got to be in that sweet spot.
Yeah. So sorry, Sophie. It is void now that we know you're a robot, according to Dylan. But that made me laugh.
On that, I suppose one big thing I wanted to reflect on BETT was if you are a teacher thinking of going to BETT, we'll talk about what you can get out of it, etc. later on, maybe in a bit more detail. But I would say the really real positive was the amount of people we met. The people making waves in education, the people we've known through social media, through the podcast. We had a good chat with Mr. P was there. We met him in real life for the first time. We met loads of different people from BBC Bite Size, Teacher Tap. We're huge White Rose education advocates. We went and saw the team there, had a chat with them. Yeah. There were just so many people there who you know of, but you can actually then get there and have a conversation with them and have a chat and realize how passionate they are. And I think that's where it was really, really good. Yeah. Was those real deep conversations you could have with people who you kind of have built a relationship with in the past maybe, or chatted to or messaged. But there's something about meeting them in real life and just seeing what their expertise at and just having a chat.
It can feel a tiny bit superficial online sometimes. Sometimes it's like, is this just an exchange? Like, well, what's happening here? But yeah, when it's in person, it is just different, isn't it? I think I said that to a few people, like, it feels different now that you're actually in front of me, even though we speak online all the time. There was one thing as well I want to talk about with BETT, and I don't know if you got this vibe, but when we were walking around, sometimes we get stopped, didn't we? Like, obviously they're all there. All these exhibitors are there, and
Are you the guys from Teach, Sleep, Repeat?
No, we didn't get stopped.
Are you the guys from the podcast?
we were secretly hoping it. But sometimes, if you make eye contact with one of the people that are on the stand, whose sole job there that day is to sell. You lock eyes for a second, and they're there in your face, and like, who are you? And what I found was really quite bizarre was how many times that once we revealed we were just teachers. This whole event for teachers, think about that's why the way I thought about it. Well, once you reveal you're just teachers, they were kind of not interested in talking to you because they're like, oh, you can't spend any money on it. Okay, oh, we're just teachers. This teaching event's not for you, mate. And I was just sort of like, all right.
I know what you mean. I know exactly what you mean, because if you're a teacher thinking of going to BETT, I wouldn't say don't ever go. I'd say, look, the problem is it's on a Thursday. Yeah, everyone's teaching. We're lucky in that we teach Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. We had that free time. We went up there anyway. Is it worth booking time off as a teacher to go up there, unless your school have given you permission with X amount of budget to try stuff out and maybe get something? Like you said, probably not. We had a conversation with someone They just stopped us. It was a whole school system for, I think it was like inputting data or something. I can't remember what it was. But
just a management system of some sort.
Yeah, management system. And again, they were chatting really nice, obviously, blah, 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 blah. So what's your role? And we were like, oh, we're classroom teachers. And it really did kind of flip, like, oh, okay, all right, have a good time, like kind of thing.
Yeah, it's quite funny.
And you do realise that, you know, at the end of the day, I think that the line that kind of stuck with me, and I guess it's unfortunate really, is money talks.
Yeah.
And I feel like BETT's amazing because it's a good opportunity to see all these unbelievable tech that's going on and all these amazing people. But at the end of the day, there's a reason it's free for educators. There's a reason that there's certain people talking at events. It's not just because it's what teachers want to hear.
Yeah.
It's because there are big companies plowing lots of money into the event to make it happen, which is great. But then an outcome of that is it's one big sales pitch.
Yeah.
And although it's useful, it was not disappointing. I think that's the wrong word, but it made sense that it felt like people were obviously just trying to get stuff into the classroom because they need sales. And there are lots of people doing it for the right reasons, but it's a sales pitch at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons we went there was to hopefully just mingle with some teachers, just talk to some teachers and be like, oh, what have you found? Have you found anything good? Like, have you found anything that you want to take back to the classroom? And it just sort of didn't happen in the end, did it really? We didn't really. I'm sure there were some teachers there, but from a visual perspective, like it didn't feel like it or seem like it. I couldn't really find any.
It felt like a lot of admin, a lot of business leaders, a lot of influencers, for want of a better word, people who've been invited up to chat or something. Again, great, but I think they're missing a trick slightly, and maybe that's why they're putting more emphasis on the table talks and things like that, where teachers book a place and chat and you can go there and speak to people. But I just think it could be maybe put on a bit more of a pedestal for the people on the coalface actually doing the teaching.
Yeah, I'd definitely go there with a purpose, is what I think what we're saying here. If you're a teacher thinking of going, you're probably not going to get as much out of it as you maybe think that they could be offering for just ordinary classroom teachers in terms of like CPD and like trying out stuff. But if you go in there with a purpose, your head teacher says, come on, we want our English is just, we want to revitalize English. Can you just go on a bit of a recon mission and find out what's out there for teaching and learning? Go to the teacher and learning section. That could be a good reason to go. But
I want to just flick back to, before we go into the main bulk of this episode in a second, just talk about that idea of the overwhelm. Because like you said, we went into BETT and there is this awe at first, like the sheer size. If anyone's been to the London XL Arena, you know it's huge. Yeah. But it is this massive space with so much tech kind of rammed in. I couldn't get over that feeling of overwhelm. Do you know, that abundance of choice? And it really made me think, and we're going to have a chat in a second about the reality of teaching and what you can actually do.
Yeah.
Because there seemed to be from BETT, and this is what's inspired our chat today, I suppose, in a second, is there was a lot of idealism. There was a lot of, wow, this is amazing. Look at this robot literally walk down the aisle.
Gonna get married.
You did a really good impression. Really good impression of that robot.
I'm now married. I did. I think you filmed it.
It's now Hayden Robot. The robot's second name is Robot. It's on our socials. But yeah, you see that. You see all this amazing tech.
We left Sophie there with her robot mates.
We actually picked her up. She's an AI bot. Sophie is it's called a math stand. It was called like math AI bot or something. Yeah. This new model, Sophie Bartlett. But the point being, we walked around all that hardware section, especially. And there was whole big things set up, like green screens for like a news report and kind of And you look at it and you think, this is unreal. What amazing opportunities for the children. Can't do it though. What am I going to do? Spend 30 grand on a studio for my primary school?
Rattling around in your pockets and find your £2.50 budget that you've got from your school. It's like, is that enough to get this camera?
Yeah, but even down to like when we're doing Scratch and we do a very basic version in our school of just writing Scratch. There's loads of models you can buy there and kids can build stuff and then write code in Scratch. There seemed to be such a disconnect at times between what actually goes on in the primary school and can physically happen, the reality, and this kind of ideal that BETT is kind of showing off and selling.
Yeah.
There's just such a huge cavern there. And I feel like that cavern's getting bigger and bigger and bigger the further along we go into this absolute rot of education and the amount of funding we're getting.
Yeah. Would you say there were many gimmicks there? Like things where they really... maybe there's a tiny application of them, but realistically, they're probably not going to be there next year.
I think in terms of a school, yes. So, but there are other businesses going there. That's the thing. It's not just about schools. You might have private tutors going. You might have business leaders who do something or, special. The one I can think of straight away, there was a lot of AI. Mm-hmm. That's something that really struck me. There was so many stalls that had AI in the name because that's the current flavor of the month.
Yeah.
A couple of years ago, they were saying it was all virtual reality headsets.
Yeah, the headsets.
That's kind of phased out. I feel like AI is here to stay, but there was an AI for everything you can possibly think of. So one stall, for example, was AI for music. And it was like with a camera, and it would give feedback immediately on like the posture. Let's say you're playing the violin, right. On your posture, it would give you feedback. Say, sit up straighter, hold the bow higher, and just help you if you're playing a violin. That's incredibly niche, and I can imagine really expensive. From a school's point of view, never really going to be a realistic option. But from the point of view of maybe a music school, and they just want to sell 2 or 3, then that's fantastic.
Yeah, I see.
So my point here is, I think there are a lot. It depends on who your market is. When your market are schools with tight budgets, there's going to be a lot of education companies there that won't cut the mustard, because when you think about how many edtech companies actually make it into primary schools, it's a handful you can name.
For sure.
And we went there, we were with Sophie Bartlett, with Lee, and we could name probably 5% of the companies that were there. The rest were new to us, and we haven't heard of them before.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of wow factor. There's a lot of wowing going on. I remember we spoke to one of the AI companies, and in a nutshell, I don't want to do them injustice, and I can't even remember their name, but they offered essentially you scanned in the documentation that you wanted to teach from, right? Let's say it was a textbook, and the AI program read that information and then turned it into like an interactive PowerPoint or like a video or something like that to like enrich the learning. And when he was like talking about it, I was like, oh, that's a really cool thing. But then that reality hits back in, doesn't it? Of like, yeah, but I'm not going to do that, because you know what? One, I haven't got the time to do this like bespoke thing every single time I teach. Is that what you're saying? I do this all the time. Like, is this the new way I teach? 2, the school's bought a scheme for 0.1% the price of that, and actually the planning's provided on that. We did it last year. I haven't got time to do this. I don't know. Maybe I'm being naive. Maybe I'm being pessimistic. But I just walked away from that stand thinking that was a cool idea, but I'm not sure there's a reality where schools have got the time to use that tech, which is cool.
Absolutely. And I think with AI in particular, I can think of loads of reasons how it's really going to help workload and wellbeing. For example, we were there with Lee, Mr. P. His team, TeachMate AI, won an award that was specifically about reducing workload.
Yeah.
Because that is harnessing the power of AI and generative text to lower workload for teachers in a very specific way. That's clearly hitting the mark. And that's something you can see a lot of teachers using for that reason. The other companies where it's kind of like an idea or this really cool thing that is awesome but isn't as practical, they're the ones I think are going to fade away, unfortunately.
It's when they're trying to solve a problem that they think is a problem but maybe isn't actually as big of a problem as they think. It's like they've kind of made an imaginary world of like, this is a problem, isn't it? And we've invented this solution to it, and actually most people are probably thinking, I mean, it's not really that much of a problem, so I don't really need this. But even though it's a cool idea, I don't know, it was weird. There was a strange feel around the place, wasn't there?
And I think that being at the LBQ store was really refreshing almost, because they have a very clear what they want to achieve. We're going to talk with Tony later. You'll hear the interview all about it, but they can show it, they can demonstrate it. There's no AI involved. It's not like it isn't just this next wave of let's use AI for the sake of it. It might in the future embrace AI for whatever reason, but it was nice just to see, no, we're doing this for this reason. Have a go, have a brew, have a chat. And it just showed that around BETT, there was a lot of different vibes, I'd say, for sure. Okay, let's move on then. Let's talk about, inspired by this, we'll play the jingle, then we'll come back and we'll talk about the reality of teaching and the dream fiction version of what everyone thinks we're going to do. Linked to what we just said about fiction and reality, I think it's a wider problem in education. So I really wanted to have this chat in this podcast, kind of inspired by being at BETT, because there is this almost imaginative version of what teaching is.
Right.
Okay. When you even within the profession as a teacher, there's so much stuff that we kind of turn a blind eye to. And when people like you and I in this podcast say, well, no, actually, let's not pretend that the SEN system is fine because it's completely broken. There are 10 children in my class who need my attention at all times, and I can't physically give them what they need. And that also means the other 22 children in my class aren't getting me either. It's okay for me to say that it's broken. Let's embrace reality. I guess this was another strand of that when we were at BETT, and it was just saying, this is awesome, but it's not realistic. So we've put together some points we think where we just want to just embrace the reality for a second. And if you're listening to this and you're thinking, oh my gosh, yes, this happens in my school as well. I just want us to be hopefully the starting point to have these conversations, because as soon as we all accept that this is the reality, maybe then we can move and do things about it instead of just nodding along. Oh, I'm going to pretend that everything's fine in my class. I don't need any support from TA ever. It's absolutely fine. No. So thinking about reality, what's the first thing that came to your mind?
Again, linking this straight to BETT, we saw tons of robotics, right? We saw tons of stuff that's probably really good for IT, right? But the reality is, in schools, IT is so far down on the list when you compare it to English and maths that trump everything. It's like, we could spend loads of money on these bots that go around, but we're going to take the kids out of all of those lessons because we're going to constantly do maths and English interventions because the reality is we don't actually value subjects like we say we do. All the schools pretend it. When Ofsted come in, when Ofsted go to a school, every school in this land, as Dylan used to say, would say, oh yes, all of our subjects are just as important as each other. Our core subjects here, we value them. We love our foundation subjects. Look how much we do for them. We've bought these bots. Hey, are the kids using them? No, they're not. I mean, sorry, Mr. Ofsted person. Yes, they are. They use them all the time for this enriched curriculum that we have. No, they don't. The reality is most schools in this country are abusing the foundation subjects and taking kids out because they're desperate to pass the SATs. They want to get the kids through maths and English because they're the subjects that the government really values, that our country values through leaderboards, etc. So what do you think about that?
You'll never see an intervention for PE. If a child, and I joked about this, we were talking with people at BETT about this whole thing of valuing stuff the right way. And we just simply don't, as an education system, value things at the same level as English and maths. Physical education, PE, to me, should be absolutely up there, just as important as being able to read and write, just as important as being able to read time and add up numbers and use money, is being physically active and fit. 100% should be up there, and it just isn't. I literally, in my career, have been told by my bosses, because they want to get the numbers up, which do you know what? I get when there's so much pressure, because it needs to come from the top down, I really do think that, to take children out of lessons, to give boosters for maths, for English, whatever it might be. And I find myself, I've said this before, taking children out of PE.
Yeah.
They get 2 PE lessons a week. They get 5 English lessons a week. They get 5 maths lessons a week. And I'm taking them out to do more of that maths. And I just think it's completely broken. And I sit there and do it because it's my job.
Yeah.
I think this, and yet it still happens. Yeah. And this is such a huge problem. I need to grow a bit of a backbone, I think. I think I've got quite a backbone, to be honest, and I say a lot of what I think. But I still think it needs to go further. I think that if I'm asked to take a child out of PE, I should turn around and say no. And I think maybe I'll do that from this year. Honestly, I think maybe I'll say, I completely agree with this. Look, I'm happy to do groups if you want to use my directed time in that way. But I'm not going to take children out of this subject for this reason. And even in doing that, I'm then saying, well, it's okay to take them out of PSHE.
Yeah, it's only another
Spanish.
Subject,
it's another subject.
Yeah.
But I just think it's awful. And I think until that mindset changes, this is the reality of teaching, no matter what anyone says. And we always say, oh, let's just pretend all the subjects are equal. I think we should think that, but we don't. The way we treat them is mad.
The reality doesn't match what we say, does it, as a profession?
No.
Another one that I struggle with, I guess, is this ideology that as teachers, and I don't disagree with this ideology, right?
Oh, yeah.
Which is that we should be always striving to be better, right? We should be embracing new things.
Getting better
never
stops.
Do you know what? When VR headsets came around, I'm sure lots of schools probably did embrace it, and maybe it could have been a good thing. It probably died out a bit. Don't see it as much these days, but whatever. With AI, do you know what? Maybe we should embrace it. It could be a good tool. But the reality is, right, that it's not just one thing at a time. It isn't just AI, is it though? Because you know what's really happening all the time is all the subjects at once, there's something new happening, and it's so overwhelming. I can't keep up with it. I said it to someone when I was at BETT. I was saying, I love all these new things. I was like, but I have, what's that thing where it's like, you're so overloaded you don't do any of them?
Yeah, like option paralysis.
Option paralysis. I feel like that as a teacher all the time. The reality is, these ideas are great, but do you know what? I'm not going to do any of them much justice because actually I've got to do this in English, I've got to change that in maths, I've got to plan this weekend anyway, I don't even have much time to think. Science is changing, we're all pretending, Ofsted are coming next month, so we're all pretending that art's now important. like we just do all these things, and then it's like, and then the IT lead comes in and says, oh, we've been to BETT, we bought these bots that go around when we use Scratch, and we can program them. And I'm like, cool, do you know what? I haven't got the brain power to learn this new thing. I can't do it.
That is the reality of primary school teaching, is that we all cannot physically be experts in everything. And then that's paired up with the fiction of the job, which is, oh, you're a primary school teacher. Yeah, I teach everything. Oh, yeah, I teach history. And then after that, I'm going to do a bit of coding how a robot moves. And after, I'm going to look at the civilization changes from the Roman Empire up through to the Celts, or the Vikings are coming, and how civilization changes. And tomorrow, I'm going to be an expert on how rivers are formed. What? Like, we're basically saying in the same breath that these specialists exist because we're learning from these amazing people, and wow, they come in and this is geography specialist. We're all admitting that these specialists exist, but then we're also pretending that we can all be specialists in every single thing. By definition, then there's no such thing as a specialist. It's okay to accept that as staff, as teachers, we are not going to be an expert in everything. We don't need to pretend that we know everything. And I think when the top down have this expectation that's just the bar is so high in everything, oh, and we've always got to improve, it's just the way we do things. No, we don't. No, we don't.
Do you know what happens? Staff either secretly don't do those things until it gets to breaking point and someone gets in trouble, or they burn themselves out trying to do it. And yeah, I don't know. I feel overwhelmed quite a lot. I have done in the past. I think that the school we work at is fairly good at reducing that, but I know there are lots of schools where rather than just embracing one new idea and allowing your staff some time to become a bit more expert in that thing, I keep going back to these bots idea because it's an easy, tangible one to do. But if your school's gone to BETT and they come back and they've bought these bots, we're changing the computing curriculum, do you know what? Don't change anything else then for a bit. Just let them work on that one thing. But the reality is, in most schools, that doesn't happen. You don't get that one change at a time because you've got to be expert in all of the subjects at once.
Absolutely.
So yeah, the reality is very different to the lovely ideology, which is great. We should all be experts to a certain level in these changing initiatives across all the subjects all the time. But I can't do it. It's overwhelming.
That's where, just to kind of summarize that point, that's where people find it easy to kind of pick holes in what we're saying. Because they'll say, well, what do you mean? Of course we have to always get better. Are you saying that we shouldn't always improve for our kids? No, what I'm saying is sometimes stuff's good enough and we can improve less at once to make it better. Let's not pretend we can make everything better all of the time, because in doing that, our staff get burnt out and stuff's worse. Okay, so the next one, and this is huge, and there's no quick fix here, it's to do with money. Okay, so you look at this amazing stuff. Let's just say you did want to invest in some really cool hardware you've seen for your computer science, and isn't that amazing? Oh gosh, that's a few £1,000s. Oh, that's a huge investment. Okay, well, we're going to have to make sure we do this properly. So we're going to spend thousands of pounds, and then we've not got any money for anything else. You go back to your school, and because, of course, the reality is that maths and English are number one, a school will look at it and go, I just can't justify that amount of money on just computer science. That's half an hour a week for the children. I mean, it's just not tangible. A huge reality in our schools right now is that we physically cannot buy anything new that's of any use, because our whole budget is taken up by the essentials. The cost of textbooks has doubled. Paper has doubled. Getting equipment for children just to use in the class, just to write things down in the first place, eats up much more of a percentage of our budget than ever before. Heating the school in the winter costs way more than ever before. These cost rises have completely outstripped the increase in the budget. Therefore, the percentage left to actually buy stuff is lower than ever in schools. So you can see as much cool stuff as you want. The reality is we simply can't afford to do it.
Well, when we were at BETT, we spoke to someone really interesting. We spoke to a woman called Deb Lyons, and she works for the local authority in Bolton. I hope I've got that correct. So, write in if I've done that wrong. But she works for the local authority, and we had a really, really good chat with her, and we actually recorded some of it. We're going to play a snippet to you in a moment. But we spoke to her and asked her how she manages her budget. So her job, and this just seems like a unicorn job, doesn't it? Because I haven't heard of this before I spoke to her, because clearly it's been stripped from our area. Her job is literally, with the local authority, to go around schools and develop computer science, wasn't it? With different schools. She speaks with teachers, she works with pupils. Like, she is that kind of that figure up here who just helps everyone in her area develop that subject, which I was like, oh, this is cool. Can we have more of these people, please? And so we asked her, okay, that's a big responsibility. how do you manage the budget? Because the reality is what Dylan just said. We don't actually have the money. She doesn't just now get a magic money tree to go with that job to be like, oh, because I'm the computer science local authority person, I can obviously just deliver all this great stuff to you for nothing. It costs money still. So, we just said to her, how do you manage that? How do you get past the barrier of you don't actually have much money, but you've still got to be successful in your job of enriching computer science? What do you do?
Let's listen.
I think one of the sort of things I always used to do when I was in school, and I mean, we still go into schools now and that sort of aspect of it, but I always go with use fewer resources better. I can't be doing lots of things all over the place. I'm a one-stop shop sometimes. That works really well for this aspect. This works really well for this aspect. And actually really use it to its fullest, especially if you've paid for it. You want to get your money's worth out of it as well. Yeah. So there are certain products that we use and we advocate to schools. This is what we recommend. And they've got the option to whether they do or whether they don't use it and things. So that's sort of, it works.
Do you find in the current climate that budgets are having a big impact on what you can do?
Yeah. We've come today and sort of gone, what's actually out there? What do we need? What would we like to put on a wish list? And I think that's, whereas at one stage you come to BETT, you go, ding, 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 ding. Yeah. And you can't. So we do something like we have like project loan boxes because schools can't actually afford the resources. So they hire it off us as part of our service. But it then comes with a whole load of robots with plans and resources. So then they can, we have started doing videos, but that's a whole different story. But it means that when they get the box, they can do all of the fun stuff of that, but there's the support there as well. And then again, there's never a daft question. So we're on, Debs, I'm just doing this and it just doesn't quite work. That's fine. And our schools know that, so yeah.
So what I really liked and latched onto about what Deb said is a solution that I hadn't really thought of, which is that idea of loan boxes. Like she, as the local authority person who has that kind of head across all of the local schools, well, rather than buying the resources for all of those schools because she thinks it's good and they all get it individually, they can just buy one set and they can loan it to the schools. And because she has that head on all of those schools, she can kind of organise as well. Like, well, if you have it now, actually next term, okay, this school, you're happy doing it this term? Can you organise your curriculum so you got it this term? Great, then we're going to go this term, you're going to have this. It cuts the cost massively, but the schools still get to use the full resource, if you know what I mean?
Exactly, and in a way where they would have bought it all for 10 times the cost, but then used it just as much.
Yeah, exactly. They might have used it all at the same time, and actually, for the sake of just reorganising your curriculum a little bit, don't use it all at the same time. Use one set and just share it across you and just use it in different terms or weeks or whatever.
I think what it highlighted to me as well was something I've been reading a lot about recently, because I've been talking about multi-academy trusts and how I just think the system is kind of unnecessary, and you see some people taking advantage of it and bloating up the executive level and taking money out of schools. There was this whole thing recently about the Brighton Academy Trust schools, and where they were skimming off 20% of the school budget to pay for that exec level of like people outside of the classroom running the show. Yeah. And a lot of the pushback from that was people saying, well, this is just the same as the local authority. The local authority have that level above, like what Deb works for, and they work with all the schools and they implement these things across loads of schools. So when you're explaining what Deb does, I can imagine someone thinking, well, yeah, that's what can happen in a trust. A trust can be economy of scale. You can have people who are working across the whole amount. There's one job, and that person like is doing something to do with computer science, and then they can go and help all the schools out. But the reality is we live in a system where these dual things exist. So you can be in one area where the local authorities still have kind of power over X amount of schools. Yeah. But in that same area where the local authority used to have 100 schools and now have 50, because the other 50 are now parts of 4 different trusts. Yeah. So what it's doing is this system is simply diluting out. It's splitting the budget. So Debs get half the budget now, and some of the trusts get some of the budget. There are 2 people doing the same job because one person's doing it for the local authority, one person doing it for this trust, maybe even 3 or 4 if there are 3 or 4 trusts in the area. Sure. And it just makes it less efficient. And one of the findings I recently read, it was 10 years on from Gove, basically. Okay. Back when he made all these changes in education back in 2014, the new curriculum. And they were looking at the impact of trusts, basically. And a couple of the findings really stood out. One was that Academy Trust, there's no evidence that they actively have a positive effect on outcomes. So it's not as if you go to a trust and all of a sudden everything's great. So it's not just this like, oh, shouldn't all schools do it because outcomes are better? No.
Because that would be easy, because then you could just backwards justify it.
Exactly.
If the outcomes are better, easy.
Yeah, but that's not the case.
Right.
And the other thing that basically one of the suggestions from the report was that one of the biggest problems right now is this split version, where you can go to, let's say we're in Kent, for example, there'll be Kent local authority who now have less of a budget because there'll be Academy Trusts who are taking some of that budget to run their schools.
Yeah.
And they said this split idea is not working. It's just not working because it's just what used to be in a local authority, oh, that's not very effective. That SEN provision that works across this local authority, that's not working very well. We need to have trusts instead, just running their own thing. In fact, we're less efficient than ever now because then the trust needs their own SEN leader. So the outcome was basically, funnily enough, one of the things they suggested was, if we're going to go all in with this trust, we have to make it so every school's in a trust so that we can almost go back to the local authority scheme where there was one central budget and there was more efficient. At the minute, we're just in this limbo zone where it's not efficient at all. And all that's happened is, yes, efficiency's gone down, but also we've almost privatized education, and we can see examples of where it's completely taken advantage of.
There's more opportunities for corruption, like you said with that school that you looked at in, I can't remember what you said. Brighton, you know. Clearly there's a little bit, even if it's not blatant corruption, there's clearly a bit of subliminal corruption going on there in terms of if they're creaming off more profit than they should be. It just wouldn't, I mean, maybe it would, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that would happen.
But it would be so much easier to fix and be on top of because there's one centralized system. Now there's 7 things going on. And I think, they're held to more account than they were, these Academy Trusts, etc. But there's just too much opportunity there for too much control. And when a multi-academy trust CEO thinks it right to pay themselves more than the literal prime minister of this country, you've got to ask yourself, what on earth's going on? I just think it's crazy.
Yeah, I agree. And maybe there's more we don't know. Do you know what? Maybe we can look into this a bit more and have more of an opinion, but it just seems quite obvious, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I just love that. You as you were saying it, I was kind of formulating this thing in my head of like, well, that means if you can't have a split, then it has to be one or the other. But when it's one or the other, they're basically the same thing.
Right.
It's like, it's just...
Apart from the trustees, private.
Yeah.
That are just given the money for the budget and they can do what they want. Oh, I don't know. It just
the CEO is on 7.8 million at this point because they've got 55 schools.
We will end up with a CEO of education.
A CEO of like a district. It's like we don't have a local authority leader anymore. It's just a CEO of
everything
of planet.
A CEO. It's crazy.
Oh God. Anyway, should we go back to our list?
Yeah.
That was a nice little break. That was different for us, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Mid-list break. So another thing about reality is the lack of time for professional development.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we live this, right? Professional development generally in schools, and if you're in a school, you'll know this. If you're not, you might be surprised. Generally happens like this: once per week. Teachers get together, they have a staff meeting. It might be called something different in yours. It's the CPD or the PDM, professional development meeting, whatever. It's a staff meeting.
Well, clearly it's in the morning when everyone's fresh and ready.
Oh, no, it's not part of the time where, you can actually think about it. It's tagged on to the end of a day when you're completely exhausted, usually midweek. You're lucky if it's on a Monday, you might be slightly fresher. But that's the reality of it, right? But we need professional development. Going to BETT made me think, wow, there's so much stuff I don't know. So much stuff that probably would be kind of good to know that I would actually quite like to implement in my classroom. They've got 1 million talks going on today. They've got these table talks over there where teachers are talking about all this good practice that I don't know about. Is that going to be implemented in my classroom? What's the reality of that? Well, the reality is no, a bunch of knackered teachers meet once a week, forcibly, even if there's nothing to actually talk about because it's part of directed time.
We've got to do it. We've got to do it.
We've got to do it. We've got to make up those directed time hours because you don't do your hours otherwise in this job. I don't know. There seems to be a disconnect between the need for professional development, which we all agree, because things are changing. We've literally said this in one of our last points. And the actual reality of when and how we get that professional development.
Do you know what doubles up on the fact that we have our professional development? Of course, we have inset days and things like that, sure. But in general, it's every week, like you said.
Yeah.
What doubles up on that impact of how inefficient and just awful it is? Like you said, no teacher wants to be there. We've just taught a full day. We've got marking to do, and we've had to go to this meeting instead. That's half the time we think is pointless. It's also usually ran by one of our own colleagues, one of us as teachers. So like we're maths leads, for example. We did the maths PDM a few weeks ago that we planned. We luckily got some time out to do it, but then we've got to deliver it. And we've just been teaching all day. I've not even had a chance to think about this, what I'm delivering, until 1 minute before I'm delivering it, because I dismiss my class and then we go to the front and we're like, right, let's do some times table stuff. No one wants to be there. I'm delivering it in a way where it could be way more efficient if I just get more time to actually properly research it and deliver a good session. No one's getting enough out of it. And do you know what it can sometimes turn into? Because it's easier to do this, just a kind of picking session where we say what's going wrong. Because it's easier to look at stuff and say, well, guys, we can improve this, this, and this. We can do that, that, that. The last thing teachers want to do after working all day is then be cattled into this room to sit down and have someone stand at the front and just say, by the way, guys, what you're doing is not good enough. You've got to do X, Y, Z, and it's because of this. Even with the best of intentions as to why that's being said, what's positive can come out of that? You put your heart and soul into this job because you've got to as a teacher. You put your heart and soul into trying to make these changes that maybe have implemented in your school or previous PDMs when you've been knackered. Someone said, oh, we've got to do this now. You're like, okay, fine. You put so much into it, like you said, above directed time. To then sit down in the PDM and someone say, oh, by the way, this is all wrong. It's just exhausting. And
it's demoralizing.
It's demoralizing. And with the best of intentions, we're all knackered.
Yeah.
So I just think there's such a better way this could happen. Book out a morning. The kids can be with some sports coaches or something.
Yeah.
Have half a day in the morning where this is just PDM time, because this is just as valuable as you teaching the kids, because this is going to make your teaching of the children way better.
And you know what? We've booked in this unbelievable maths expert whose entire job is being a maths expert. So Dylan and Hayden, you can just sit down for a bit. But seriously,
I thought you were going to say we can just come to the front.
No. I wasn't even going to big us up. I was literally going to highlight the hilarious bias in this whole system of, like, it generally is a staff member delivering CPD to other staff members. And by the way, that staff member that's delivering it has had no professional development. Sometimes, if you're lucky, you might go on a course or something, and your job is to kind of
relay the course. Yeah,
it's like, okay, whatever. Maybe that's cost efficient. I don't care. But generally, that's just not the case. Like, when schools force out weekly CPD sessions and stuff, I don't know. I think from top down, we like to say in teaching, the ideology is, oh yeah, staff, we have so much professional development. We are ever changing. We are constantly redefining ourselves and learning.
History,
it's like, no, science. We're not. Do you know what we do? Do you know what we really do? Is once a year, we sit down and we go, haven't changed geography this year. Here's a new scheme we're going to do. Do you remember last year when we totally sold you on this scheme that we said was the best thing ever, and we made you all do this scheme? Don't like that one anymore. Here's a new scheme to do. And that now copy, paste into the other 10 subjects. That really is probably what happens in schools, like for 90% of the staff. Yeah. It's not real professional development. No. It's not. Here's your new scheme. Can you get your head around this new scheme?
Well, not even a new scheme, because that's huge. Just a new thing that I've seen at school. Like, just another thing to do. And that links in with the next thing. The reality in teaching. Nothing is ever taken away. Nothing is ever taken away. There's this idea, and I can't remember the author, but do you remember we went on the podcast with Matt, and it was the Australian podcast, The Art of Teaching. Yeah. He posted about this book, and it's called The Pruning Principle. And the idea is that when you're pruning plants, you're cutting away stuff. Sure. The idea is every time you start a year in a school, you should start off with a pruning.
Right.
You should ask yourself the question, before I add anything, what can I take away that won't have an impact on outcomes? So there's this idea of always lowering, reducing. Because the reality is in teaching, for so many teachers, is it's always an addition.
Yeah,
Here's another thing, like the PDM you just said. Can you try this now in geography? Can you try that in history? It's not, let's try this in history by not doing that. It's not, let's not do, at the end of the lesson now, we have to answer the question we asked at the start. Oh, also now, can you also do a quiz? Oh, and also, can you also do something else? It's not get rid of it, it's do that as well. Do that as well. And you end up teaching so bitty, because you think, I've got 7 things to tick off. I've got to do this specific spelling thing here, and then I've got to do that peer assessment there, and then I've got to make sure that the children have swapped their books over, and I've got to make sure that the children have edited their work, because editing is the big focus right now. But when editing becomes the big focus, it's never, okay, well, this time needs to come from somewhere, so we have to lower the bar in something else. Never, ever, ever is it accepted that we have to lower the bar in something else. This is the realistic side of teaching. We have to lower the bar in something else. We have to get rid of something else. We all sit there going, oh, how can we fit in this handwriting that we never do? The answer is we can't. That's why you can't answer that question, because no one wants to say that we can't do it.
Can I summarize what I think you're saying here into a nice fiction versus reality thing? The fiction is we're always increasing the bar. That's the fiction. That's what the school tells the governors and the local board and the Ofsted, whatever. We're always raising the bar. The bar was here last year, now the bar's here. That's the fiction. The reality is the bar either doesn't change or it goes down anyway. The reality. Because do you know what? You can't actually fulfill that fiction. The bar does drop. Like, teachers will just not do something properly.
Well, there are 25 bars. That's the thing.
Yeah.
When you say I'm raising the bar, it's
in
in one thing.
Yeah.
There's 15 other bars that we're trying to keep up, and one of them will drop off.
Yeah, and it does. And I guess that's better. What I'm trying to say is the reality is one of those bars does decrease.
Yeah.
The fiction is, no, none of them did. All of our teachers now just do more. It's like, no, that's a beautiful narrative. You can tell Ofsted if you want, but if they actually come around and look at your school and they really dig deep, they will see that, that bar though, I tell you what, when you introduce this thing over here, that one did drop, even though you told them not to. It did, because we're human beings, and that's just how it works.
I suppose the last point we're going to talk about the reality of teaching is, especially if you're outside of education or if you're a new teacher, you only have been in one school.
Yeah.
You might not know this reality very well. I can't explain to you how different schools are from one school to the next. And that's in terms of well-being, that's in terms of workload, that's in terms of outcomes, that's in terms of what children you have in front of you, affluence, poverty, opportunities for the children, trips.
Literally just the size of the school, whatever.
Anything. Like, it's so different, down to the point where, Hayden, you wanted to talk about something Lee mentioned. He went to train in the school. And the difference between the Rami up earlier, where someone wanted to go and watch their child do something in PPA and with docs time, that's one school. There's another school that's something very different.
Yeah, Lee was talking to us about a school he did some training where they've switched, and we've talked about this before actually, where they switched to a 4-day week for the staff. So the children are still in 5 days a week, but the staff, the teachers, they do 4 days and they get a whole day off. And that whole day does comprise of PPA, subject leadership, basically just whatever admin stuff they've got to do, planning, just go and plan. Do you know what? Your PPA is all day now. Who cares? You're going to spend that long doing it anyway. And the staff get the day off, and apparently they were surveyed on it, and it was unanimous. You might think, well, of course it was, but it was unanimously positive that the staff were like, this is so much better for everyone.
I think 1 day of time outside of the classroom a week, and it being flexible, like you can take it home if you want, or you don't have to be in a room because there might just be something you have to do that day and then you work on the Sunday. Teachers work at the weekend all the time. Yeah. I think that could genuinely transform a lot in this job in a lot of schools.
But let's go back to your previous point for a second. The reality is there is no collective reality.
Exactly.
That worked for that school for whatever reason, and it probably comes down to budget. They've probably budgeted differently to every other school. Schools are so different, which is what you were saying, that I want to say this again, there is no collective reality. And I think this was a huge problem with BETT, by the way, is the idea that everyone at BETT, every company there has rooted themselves in some sort of reality of what they think is happening in schools. And the funny thing is, none of them align because they're all rooted in a different version of the reality, because there is no collective reality of teaching. Like you said, you can think of polar opposites in school. I can think of the most toxic school that I've ever worked in versus the school I work in now. I can think of a school that is a 1-form entry that started last year versus an established 4-form entry school. Like, they're just so different, plus all of the things Dylan just said, right? The collective reality is just not there. It's not there.
And I think when we say reality versus fiction in terms of teaching, I think the bottom line of everything we've just said here is you cannot sit and describe what goes on in a school and be more than 10% accurate across schools in the country.
Yeah, even us in this, we're sat here saying reality, right? Yeah. Realistically, we're reflecting on our own experiences and people we've spoken to. Yeah. Are there people out there that we haven't spoken to who have another different version of what we've said? Of course there are. So there'll be someone that listens to point 2 and was like, actually, no, that's actually not the same for mine. Yeah. I actually don't feel overwhelmed at all in my school's initiatives, because my school does have an incredible policy on how to introduce new initiatives, so that one doesn't relate to me.
And do you know what's really, really striking about that is that's so obviously true, because if you just look in the comment section sometimes in our reels, there will be people who react to us reading out what a teacher has said has happened to them, has literally happened to them, or us saying, this is what we experienced in a school, this was real.
Yeah.
There'll be someone who comments saying, that doesn't happen. I've not seen that before. We talk about teacher martyrs. Okay, teachers who like revel in the fact they've got to do loads of work and it's something they wear it as a badge of honor. There were people who commented saying, I've never seen one of them.
Don't exist, mate.
Yeah, cool. Okay, great. I have. So your reality isn't the only one when it comes to teaching. And having a bit of an open, broader mind with that would help a lot of people, I think.
And trying to make a company, just going back to BETT one more time, trying to make a company that meets the needs of people in multiple realities is actually really hard. It's really, really hard to do. And that's why we see so many little niche things, so many little gimmicky things where we're like, clearly this person's the experience of school is very like limited to this one reality, which I'm sure does exist. Like you said, one school might buy in these things. But if you want a really successful company in edtech, you've got to be broad. You've got to fulfill that wider reality, right?
I think this is where we have to play our interview with Tony Cann. So Tony Cann was the founder of LBQ, Learning by Questions. We love Learning by Questions because, like we said, for us, it's a tool that's founded in reality. You know, schools need to find out where their kids are, and it's fundamentally born out of his desire to help teachers and children. And the chat we had with him was really cool, just about 5 minutes long. We're going to play it now, and we can really get into why he started Learning by Questions and how actually companies can be rooted in the reality of what schools need and can deliver it as well. I thought it was really inspiring.
Yeah, let's play it.
I was part of a government organisation called Training and Enterprise Councils. I was the chairman of East Lancashire. And we realised that schools were key. And we didn't really think schools were performing as they ought to have done. And the government asked me to serve on a party about working party. There were 2 industrialists there. And I was absolutely appalled at the level of workload. You know, not just teaching was not really it. It was the preparation, and it was the marking and the feedback, right? The teaching in the classes was only a fraction of it. So I had all the technology at that moment of time to be able to do whiteboards. And I thought that would help. So I came back and I said to my team, come on, we're going to do whiteboards. And we also had the software because we did plans for chemical plants and things like that. So we had the software. So I said, we'll do it with software because just having a whiteboard is no good at all, really. So we came back and we developed whiteboards. First year we sold 50, and it doubled every year after that. If you double it for 13 years, you get to about 200,000 a year, and that's what happened. So we have developed software with it, but we also, as I visited a lot of classrooms, I visited class to see how they were using it, I realized that the teachers really didn't really understand what the kids were learning. Some were learning nothing, some were looking out of the window, some were flicking paper pellets at their friends, right? So I realized that the teachers, in order to really be effective, had to know what the kids were learning. And so we began to develop handheld devices to give the teachers information. But schools didn't want more devices. So basically, when tablets came out, we saw that we could use those and small computers. And we continued to use questions to inform the teachers instantly what the kids had learned and what they hadn't learned and what were misconceptions so that they could correct them.
I think what Learning by Questions does, as someone who uses it, it allows me to do my job more. And I see my job as being a teacher. It doesn't replace the teacher. It gives feedback. But what I find amazing about it is I can see so quickly which children need what input from me.
Yes, but it does something else too, because what it allows teachers to do, to spend energy and time looking after the kids, finding out those that have issues, right? Looking if they had ADHD or the start of it and so on. And they enable the teachers to have time and energy now to deal with that. That's a very important part of it, is time and energy for teachers. And also the kids love it because the kids love the feedback. And the answering questions in that way with feedback gives them a dopamine shot. Every single question, you actually see them going, yeah, got it right.
That's enough, isn't it, for them?
And actually, they want more. They want more and more and more. In fact, they complain when you stop it. No, seriously, they think it's a game. It's not a game, of course, but they enjoy it. They want more. And so learning suddenly becomes something dynamic, and they're really enjoying it.
It's refreshing to hear someone outside of the classroom understanding inside of the classroom so well. We speak to a lot of people, we're here at BETT now, And a lot of people are quite removed from the classroom. They don't really get it, but it sounds like you get it. Like you're talking to two teachers here. We know what it's like in the classroom, and you're absolutely spot on. But also the children. I think it's really refreshing to hear. It's not just about the teachers. It's the pupils. It's the children themselves that we want to achieve. Because at the end of the day, they're the next generation. They're going to be leading this country.
Our job is to understand it. And I realized, not being a teacher, I didn't really understand it. So I have to understand what the job actually is. I still don't properly understand it, honestly, right? But actually, we are beginning to come up with something that will really help children and teachers, and that will change the world. I think the wealth of a country is the skills and knowledge of its inhabitants, and we're ignoring a third of the kids. We're not developing the skills and knowledge of them. We've given up on them. That is terrible.
I agree. Thank you so much for joining us. Before you leave us, can I ask you, from your wisdom, your years in this industry, what's the biggest thing you've ever learned?
Well, how difficult teaching is, how difficult schools are. Yeah. We've got different children, different teachers, different environments, different homes, and it's not just a one-size-fits-all sign here. It is very complex.
What that chat made me realize was there's so many amazing people out there. That's what BETT actually was amazing for, like I said, the networking. Yeah. And even when we're talking about, these companies aren't maybe rooted in reality, or they've just got to understand it's not realistic, it doesn't take away from the fact that there's people out there trying to help other people, trying to do the right thing. And I think, speaking to Tony, that was someone I listened to, and I was like, I think I'd run through a brick wall for you, because you are completely aligned with understanding how hard teaching is, but also completely unapologetically, the children need to do really well though, and we need to achieve that. Tony's 87. He could have just retired. He could have sailed off into the sunset. He could have been quite happy with his previous businesses where he made the Promethean boards. But he went, no, I want to help children. And that's where edtech can be amazing, I think. And that's where it can be rooted in reality. And these things can be really, really useful. We just need to all have honest, open conversations about cost, about impact, and not take things personally when actually it just doesn't work for some schools.
Yeah, I'm glad you made it a bit more positive, because I do worry sometimes that I'm just sounding pessimistic. And you're right. Everyone there cared about the children to some degree. Were there probably some CEOs that may be a bit more money orientated? Okay, whatever. I don't care. Because you know what? We spoke to a CEO and he was genuinely inspirational. Like when he said his age, I was a bit like, what? Sorry,
Tony.
And he I think off interview, he literally said to us, he was like, what's the point? I'm not going to be here forever, is what he said. And as long as I can just continue to use my money and my power to help children and help teachers in schools, he was like, then I'm all right.
Yeah.
And he said something like that, and I was just like, yeah, that's something to aspire to be, 100%, isn't it? Someone like that.
Inspirational. Tony, we appreciate your time. I think we'll wrap it up there. And guys, as always, if you've got this far and you haven't yet rated us, it would really help us. So leave us a rating wherever you listen to us on your podcast, and give us a follow. Share it with someone who you think might find it useful. And we'll see you next week for another episode.
Maybe we'll see you next year at BETT.
Oh.